I know that you've actually done in your book, you had it's in one of the opening pages, chart 1.1, defining pre-modernism and modernism, and you define postmodernism by contrasting it with modernism, and then you also bring in pre-modernism, so like the medieval pre-modernism period. Would it be okay if you could help us go through that? I know you talk about pre-modernism as mysticism
Sure.
and faith and realism and subject to God's will. Would you be able to just give us a raising the bar special of how we can see everything like a broad take on it from those various stages?
So we live in the real world, and we need to understand and engage with the real world if we're going to be successful in our lives. But then the question is, what is reality fundamentally? And the modern position has been to say, well, it's the natural world, it's physical, it's the world of cause and effect, and that's what we need to understand. And so we are naturalists in our orientation, and we use our senses, we use our reason, we do experiments, and then more formally, we do scientific method, especially on the complicated things, to figure out the truth about the way the world is. And that's broadly speaking the naturalist position. Now, it was revolutionary in the early modern world, a few centuries ago, against a more dominant intellectual framework that had said the natural world might be exist, but really it's a lower order. That the important thing is that there's a super or a superior to the natural world, and that's what's really real. That's what's really important, and it's non-physical, it's non-material, and we have to understand the natural world only as a derivative phenomenon from this higher world. And then if you ask, well, how do we come to know this higher world? And the argument there would be, well, there are some special individuals historically who had direct access or communication. They received signals or revelations or prophecies, and they then wrote them down, or they told them what those are. And those are the people who really know the nature of reality, these mystics or these prophets. But the rest of us who don't have those special supernatural connections, we have to accept what they say on faith. And so we follow the leader intellectually, or we follow the institutions, or we follow the books in which those are recorded. Now that debate between, and this is at a high level of abstraction, a pre-modern, more mystical, supernaturalistic philosophy, and a more naturalistic, empirical, rational, science-friendly philosophy is deep. And that's what I'm calling pre-modernism versus modernism. Now, postmodernism is another thing altogether. It is a thoroughgoing skepticism, in effect, of saying, a plague on both of your houses, because from their perspective, what they're thinking is both the pre-modernists or religious people and scientific people think that they know what the truth is, that they know what reality is, and they've got these special methods to figure out what the truth is. But the postmoderns buy into all of the skeptical arguments that have been developed to say that we really don't know anything. Everything is illusion. Our minds are subject to all sorts of biases and preconceptions and conditioning or whatever it is, such that we really shouldn't even be talking about what reality is. We just have these subjective beliefs or these subjective creations, and sometimes they are socially constructed. So nobody really knows what the truth is or what reality is. And so we should just stop using those words. Now that's one set of fundamental issues. Now another set of issues is not just knowing reality, but knowing ourselves. Who am I? If I'm going to put together a flourishing life, the best life I can possibly live for myself, what goals should I set for myself that are both realistic and idealistic and legitimate, and then dedicate myself to those. So I have to understand what my humanity is, what my capacities are, and what's really good in the world. And what, again, we find at a high level of abstraction is this three-way debate. So the models will say, you are an individual, you have your own life to live, you have your own character to shape, you have your own dreams to pursue, and socially we should give people lots of freedom so that they can go out and do those sorts of things. And so that individualism, that dream big and have lots of freedom framework came out of modern philosophy. And most of us in the Western world and increasingly in the global world are coming from that perspective, so to speak. But there's another deep position that, again, comes out of a pre-modern, more religious framework, which is to say that you're not really an individual with your own goals and your own dreams. Instead, you are a fragment, say, of the divine, or you were created by a supernatural being, a supreme being who owns you and has already told you what you are supposed to do. And your goal is to subject yourself to that higher being, to be a servant, and to sacrifice even your goals and your dreams for the agenda or the goals of this higher superior being. And of course, it may be that that higher superior being has his representatives on earth, and those are the ones to whom you should subject yourself and serve. So are you a servant, or do you have your own life to live? Are you an individual, or are you part of this larger supernatural or institutional whole? Should you be free to live your own lives and pursue your own dreams, or are you a subject, and what you should do is sacrifice and do your duty for the higher being? And that's a very deep difference in understanding of what it is to be a human being and what your life is all about. But again, what the postmoderns will do is to say a plague on both of your houses, because one side is saying that you are an individual with your own agency and your own dreams. The other is to say you are a soul or a spirit that is a fragment of this divine spirit, and you have these objective obligations and duties that you are supposed to follow. But what the postmoderns will say is, look, there are no individuals, there are no divine souls, and instead what the human being is really this plastic thing that is born into a social reality, but we're all born into very different social realities, and we are constructed not by God with an agenda or by our own self-creation, but rather we are constructed by the societies and the various groups that we are born into. So you're born into an ethnic identity or a gender identity or a racial identity, but they're all so different, and they're also so contradictory to each other, but none of them is true or objective. So what you really should do is just see yourself as part of these overlapping groups that are contending with each other, sometimes violently.
Yeah, so it's competing social groups rather than the honoring of the individual, the sovereign individual itself.
Yes.
And I also, I mean, I've noticed that the word postmodernism itself gets bandied around quite a lot, and I've actually heard different definitions for this. I know Jordan Peterson talks about it as almost like a rebranding of what he says is neo-Marxism or cultural Marxism.
Right.
I've also heard this. I mean, you kind of loosely inferred it there yourself. Kind of, it's identity politics. It's almost a little bit of that as well. I've heard it also connected to political correctness. I mean, is there
all three of those you just mentioned are capturing elements of it.
Yeah.
Right. So the Jordan Peterson emphasizing of the neo-Marxist or cultural roots, that's to pick up more of the political strands of it.
Right.
The identity politics element is to pick more your human nature elements, not necessarily political, although it can be politicized, but what are you as a human being? What is your core identity? And then the other elements, I think, are the important skepticism, that's cognitive negativity about human beings. That's another important part of the element as well, or the package.